everyone, and welcome to the special edition of the President's Video Report. I'm Bill Liss, Communications Chair of the Explorers Club, and this past week, Richard Garriott had the opportunity to host his first Fireside Chat. But because of disruptions of the pandemic and different time zones, many were forced to miss it. So we've prepared the special highlight report to bring you up to date. We do hope you find it interesting and informative.
First of all, good evening, everyone. Greetings, fellow explorers. If you don't know me yet, I'm Richard Garriott. I am the newly minted president of the Explorers Club. And this is the first of what I now plan as quarterly fireside chats, coming to you today from my home in New York and various homes around, from our home to your home, so to speak. But I do hope to, by the next iteration, be broadcasting these fireside chats from our headquarters. And since my term as president has really still just started, I wanted to begin by repeating something that I know you have seen or you should have seen if you read your email that I talked about at the member meeting that we had a month ago, which are the four initial objectives of my term as president. I'll just mention them by name here. But again, these are the things I'm hoping that I'm kind of held accountable to during my time, and that's why I think it bears repeating at least one more time. One is focusing on the fact that we are a member organization, that we work for the members and often through the chapters, and everything we do should sort of be, the decisions we make should be thought of against that. Two, expanding the incredible success I think we've had with our recent pushes for youth and diversity in all aspects of our club. We're already doing a great job on the board, but I want to make sure we're pushing that into vice presidencies and awardees and other areas. Three, build on the key partnerships and sponsorships. Interestingly, this unusual and in many ways difficult time that is pushing us all online has had some interesting side effects where combined with being online and with a lot of other support from our current partners, we've actually expanded our reach significantly, and that is allowing our potential partnerships and sponsorships to rise with it. And then point number four is good governance, which good governance is always a good idea, but especially now, I think demonstrating good governance in difficult financial times as we're in now, and as we go out to look to raise money and ask people to support the club, good governance is something we need to stick to so that people who support the club know that their support is well managed. First up on the board agenda was nominations. So we assigned our vice presidents and officers because because you ought to know them. I'll mention who these ones are as a list. Our treasurer is Barbara Duran. Our secretary is Arnala Trent. Our vice president for research and education is Trevor Wallace. Our vice president for flags and honors is Martin Nguye. Our vice president for membership is Nancy Nunow. Our vice president for chapters is Nancy McGee. And our vice president at large for conservation and sustainability and wildlife is Mark Fowler. And we did have, whoops, I didn't make my notes here correctly. Hold on. We actually, at the board meeting, had been discussing that we had another vice president at large, which ultimately has changed. And so different from the board meeting, our vice president for mission programming and coordination is Lynn Danaher. We have three appointed directors, Chad Anderson, Dan Coble, and Heidi Montijo. Our ombudsman is Steve Paget. Our directors emeritus are Brian Hansen and Bill Liss. And by now you probably have heard that we have some honorary positions that we filled. Our new honorary president is Buzz Aldrin, and our new honorary chair is Jeff Bezos. And while Kathy Sullivan was already one of our honorary directors, and so she did not, she still has an honorary director position with us. Bertrand Picard, who obviously has provided amazing service to the club and continues to, we actually added him as a new honorary director. And we added one more, former NASA administrator, Dan Golden, who, by the way, has not only always been a big supporter of this club, but particularly in helping us with a lot of these honorific titles and connections, has been instrumental, and I believe will be able to help us quite a bit. The rest of the slate of honorary directors is unchanged, so I'm not going to bother reading that to you. We have committees of the board. We have an executive committee, which always includes the president, myself, but in this case also includes Barbara Duran, Heidi, Janet Walsh, David Isserman, and Kelly Girardi. We have an audit committee, which is led by Heidi. We have our ethics and governance, which is led by Janet Walsh. And then we have some advisory committees that are set up due to the bylaws of the club. And actually, that's a long enough list that versus continue to read out names for you, those will be available to you. They're probably only of direct interest to you if you're interested in that specialty. So I will move on to the presidential report, which was the next item of business at our board meeting. After opening the meeting, we discussed the appointment of slate of vice presidents and chairs that I just read to you, and they were approved. The new honorary chairs and presidents were approved. The new honorary members were approved. I asked the chairs to submit their committees prior to the next board meeting. So even though that first step was to set up who the leadership was on those committees, that they then have to set up the full committee underneath the chairs. And by the way, that's a chance for you guys to step in and step up for service. So those have not been formally approved, even if one of those chairs has their pet list of who they might want on their committees. They're not stamped until the next board meeting. And so there is still a window of time here available for any of you who are not yet serving in leadership with this club to jump in and be a part of this great organization. And I encourage that if anybody's interested. We're targeting the next board meeting on a couple of dates in June. Those have been sent out to the board meeting members to see when they're available, but it has not been selected. All the board members and vice presidents have been asked to sign confidentiality and conflict paperwork. I do not know if they all have yet, but they all will, obviously, before they can continue past that first board meeting. And also during that time, I suggested something I'll come back to, which is that we create public service announcement type video clips that we could have used, for example, right here today to open this meeting. If we had a nice short clip that we could run that says, ta-da, this is the Explorers Club. And at the end of a lot of these meetings, we could, not this one because you guys are all members, but we should end them with hey, if you like what you heard, join the Explorers Club and here's how. And so I think we need to create a set of those kinds of little video clips. At the board meeting, I also presented my four initial priorities, and we talked about these fireside chats. We set up these fireside chats, of which this is the first. And I had originally targeted April 20th, so I'm 10 days behind schedule compared to what I told the board. So apologies. But we at least did get that kicked off. Another thing we talked about were some of our big upcoming events. A lot of which last year just didn't happen because of COVID, and this year's they're still under a cloud of concern and debate as to when would we be able to do these things legally, much less safely, which hopefully lines up well with safely, but are really two overlapping considerations. And those are, just to discuss a couple of those here, and I'm sure we'll come back to them a couple times during the discussion. It's the one coming up soonest is Oceans Week. The one coming up in the summer is GLEX, the Global Exploration Summit we do in concert with Portugal. And then the big question of an ECAD. We've obviously missed our usual timeframe of March already, but since we didn't have a 2020 ECAD at all, I've been pushing to at least try to have an ECAD this year, even if it's late in the fall. And so the way it looks like, by the way, those are lining up. And in the Q&A, I'll let Will go into it a little deeper, but just to give you a little lift on it here up front, it looks like Ocean Week, even though the club will be beginning to open, which again we'll discuss a little later, it's so close to when it looks like we will be able to probably get the club open that we're going to plan that one as an online event. The first known in-person event, barring again any reasons that we must shut it down due to unforeseen changes in the COVID curves, will be the Glex event in Portugal. The country of Portugal is not only expecting to be open, but has specifically written waivers to make it open for Glex. That even though they might start shutting down some travel into their country to protect their country, they have already thought this through and are already, have planned exemptions for any of us that might be coming in for Glex. Although, as I said, they actually expect that that it'll be more fully open. But even if it starts to clamp, Glex is still intended to be as an in-person event. And then ECAD 2021, we are researching locations and dates for doing that late in the year. Now, when we thought we might have been able to do it earlier in the year, late in the summer even potentially, we were looking at outdoor venues because we thought that would both be safer and in good weather. We could have a wonderful kind of outdoor event. Something that's, it turns out things aren't opening up fast enough to make that possible. So we're now looking more like the November timeframe. And because of colder and potentially drizzly weather, we actually think a large, open, but technically sheltered in an indoor way event space is more appropriate. So we are looking at that, but there's no news to announce on that. But I think there either is or has been or will be polling going out to all of you about when would you potentially feel comfortable at a face-to-face event like an ECAD. And so that will go into the planning, significantly. Then to bump through other reports, from the executive secretary, we talked about the scheduling of asbestos. That'll come up in the QA as well, so I'll just mention it here. We had a finance report that, again, the details of which aren't worth going into probably here. We did approve the recommendations of new members that brought in 80 new members across the various new kinds of, from fellowship to term to friends, some reclassifications and reinstatements. We talked about demographic graphs from the 2020 annual meeting. And by the way, you can go to the club's website about annual meeting documents, and you can see some of these results, demographic graphs, and something about the Summit Fund and some other things that may interest you. I'll skip some of the reports that were either too brief, I think, to be of interest to you, or that we don't have a summary in this particular wrap up, that we didn't get it together here in our rough draft. I'll speak to development, since that was one of the ones that I was shepherding, and so I'm now obviously stepping out of. I was a VP at large for development, so the last sort of thing for me on that front was to talk about how the fact that our discovery relationship continues to grow very positively. By the way, between that board meeting and now, we finished the fourth of 4 of the grant meetings. That was the first one I actually attended in person. And the target gift of grants through the Explorers Club Discovery Grant Program was about $1 million. And despite the fact that because of COVID, the rate of expeditions going out to the field was substantially reduced, despite that, we still came very, very close to giving out the full $1 million in grants. And so, by the way, I think that's just super exciting for our grant program, which is now grown to a much larger size. By the way, the other grants were also all given out. So anyway, we just had a phenomenally successful year in grants. You already heard from Kevin about the Explorers Club store. David Isserman and others have just done a great job with the Explorers Club store. Not only are there great products, I've ordered myself 4 of these beer steins that came in an hour before we went live. And but what's interesting about that is that, while it has been true in the past that the store has brought in funds, but not enough to make a significant impact in our yearly budget. That is rapidly changing. That it really has already changed. It's now pulling in probably 10 times what it ever has previously. And anyway, much congratulations to them. Pardon me, I'm getting people texting me on the side here too. Hard to keep track of all the different sources of input here. But let's see. Oh, we have the new book deals in process. We'll talk about that in the Q&A. We're exploring podcasts and other methods of outreach beyond the lecture series that we do, which are also doing very well. And in any case, I think development has done very well for us this year. In fact, some of those development relationships we started this year have really been essential to the effectively the survival of the club during this very tough year. The combination of our great partners and work upon the staff to go out and apply for grants which we received as part of the stimulus packages have really protected the existence of the club itself and our fine staff to continue the work we do on your behalf. And so, in any case, it's been a stable year despite the struggles. Our Vice President of Wildlife Conservation and Sustainability, Mark Fowler, reported in that not only are we engaging a new series or a bunch of new individuals to help out with lectures on the subject of conservation, but March was World Wildlife Month, and they did a lot of promoting some of the lectures that were again associated with that field. They are launching a World Wildlife Week, and they hosted a number of short talks spotlighting amazing members who do this sort of work in the field. On research and education, there's a new challenge coin that I don't know if it's for sale yet, but if you can go to the store at store.explorers.org, you might find out yet if the By All Means Possible challenge coin is up, which is a fundraiser for specifically research and education. And by the way, the research and education group is seeking a new chair for the exploration fund, and they either have or they intend to send out a call to the membership to do that. All right. There was reports from the audit committee, ethics and governments, legal, and things of this nature. By the way, lectures, we had a report from lectures. Lectures is fascinating. Again, going back to this being forced online and having great media partners like Discovery have made our online lectures lift, dramatically. Specifically, the total minutes of lectures watched apparently has increased by by more than 600%. The majority of these, or about half of them, a little more than half, came from people who follow us on the Explorers Club on Facebook. And there were, not only 65 weekly events, but all the chapter connects, Oceans Week, Climate Weeks. There was more than 100 online events, and they really just went phenomenally. Similarly, by the way, the publications, I've always loved our publications, whether it's our log or our journal. If I can get them back out here from behind me, I just happen to have a couple here, of course. Our log and our journal are amazingly well crafted and incredibly good pieces of communication about our club and the activities of our members. But I want to call attention to just one new one that by now I know all of you know, which is this new thing we did called the Explorers Club 50 people changing the world that the world needs to know about. This has had legs and has paid dividends for us as an organization in ways far beyond at least what I would have expected. And much kudos to previous President Richard Weiss and the fine folks over in our publications group to have put this together. The vision to do it and the execution of this by focusing on young up and comers instead of the old gray hairs who have, who we often talk about, and by changing by purposefully casting a wide net globally. So picking young up and comers with a global perspective means inherently the people we have selected here are not only the kinds of young, diverse members we want in our organization, but it actually really showcases well the how broad-based the important work of exploration is going on right now. And we went out to fundraise against this because obviously it costs money to print it. But what was interesting is when we talked to a lot of our partners, they were thrilled to be a part of this, and not just for this once, but they are hoping, and we now plan to keep this going as a yearly event, because it again is it for anyone who is trying to showcase the future of exploration. This is it. This is a great way to pull it in. And let's see here. And then we went on to operations. We'll talk about more of that in a minute when we talk about the headquarter renovations, asbestos removal and such. Okay, so that was at the board meeting proper. That was sort of the reports that came in during the board meeting, with a few updates, as I mentioned, that have happened since then. I now want to talk for a minute about the initiatives that I will be taking to the board and staff now. Most of them have heard this. We've talked about it, but I'm going to be eventually formalizing this as, this is what I really hope we move forward through. One I mentioned a little earlier, which is the PSAs, that we do so much now online, and often we'll record them and then rebroadcast them, that we need short, relatively small in seconds, trailers to be able to insert into our online broadcasting. Things like, this is the Explorers Club. Please join the Explorers Club. Please buy tickets to our upcoming major events. Please buy the swag from our store that you can find at store.explorers.org. And also celebrating, our partners and supporters of the club itself. And so I think that we will gain, a significant value directly into membership and directly into fundraising and all these other things if we do a good job of wrapping those. Another thing too, this is another discussion item that, by the way, if this is something you have a strong opinion on that differs from what I'm about to say, please let me know. Please send something in to suggestions@explorers.org. But one of the discussions that I've been having with our new VPs and chairs of things like memberships and flags and grants is that, the way I can illustrate this is, I think all of us, or many of us, are familiar with at least one case of either somebody applying for membership that got turned down and they're not sure exactly why, or somebody applying to take a flag and they're not sure exactly why, or somebody applying from a grant or trying to apply for a grant and they don't get it and they're not sure exactly why. But what often happens, or at least the worry of someone who does not receive this honor of being a member, carrying a flag, or getting a grant, is they wonder what that criteria was. Is it something subjective? Is it that somebody's friend got in and they didn't? Or is it political that might change over time based on which administration is in? And so one of the things I'm encouraging that we do on all of these sort of things is make sure that our criteria for being put forward and advancing is as objective as possible, that can be checked and people can know before they submit that the answer should be yes. They would be very surprised if it wasn't. And as little or rarely as possible, be subjective, meaning a value judgment that somebody might make between, somebody's idea is better or worse than somebody else's idea. And even though, and I'm sure that there will be times where we haven't written objective criteria, but if a debate shows up, that means we ought to in the future write a new objective criteria. And so that's something that across the board and all these kind of honorific things that my guidance to that leadership is going to try to make sure that it's as clear and stable, and nobody is hurt or offended, because we'll have as much of it as possible handled in as objective criteria as possible. So that's another one that I'm working on now. Another one that I know Will may find humorous here, but and a lot of people I mentioned this to find this kind of funny, but I'm really quite serious about it, which is trying to get a lot of our lost flags returned. And what's interesting about our flags is we periodically lose them, or periodically they don't come back. And what's interesting about that is that, our flags, the longer our flags have been out and the more expeditions they've been out on, the more actual value they have to us as a club. And in fact, when they become so valuable that we don't want to risk them in the field anymore, we retire them. And so our club is full of framed flags that we have retired that are hanging on the wall. But periodically, some flags just don't come back from expedition. And I happen to be a person whose flag was taken out again and didn't come back, just as a case study. And so I've felt the pain of the loss of a flag. And what's interesting about that is our flags universally only have a deposit of something like $200, I think it is, to take a flag out, and that if you don't return it, you just pay $200. And the problem with that is $200 is not very big motivation to return a flag. And for some flags, like a flag that has never been out, $200 is probably fine. It's the replacement cost of the flag. But if you want to take a flag on expedition that has a long lineage of expeditions, you ought to be willing to put up a larger deposit, in my mind, to make sure that you are caring for that flag in a way that is commensurate with the actual value to the club of that flag. And so one of my suggestions is that we are going to change the deposit structure for flags, that you can get an inexpensive flag, but some famous flags will be more costly to take with you. And the more one people might also find a little more edgy is that I also think that we should have a plaque on the wall that basically says that, I think there's at least one example of a flag that did not get returned because the expedition itself was lost. And that is an honorific for that flag and for that crew that had that tragedy. But there's also a list of flags that did not come back because somebody returned but did not bring that flag back. And I think that should be listed because I think people should feel that it's a really serious thing not to return a flag. And that hopefully will be encouragement for people to dig into their cellars or boxes or go back into the same field to do a search for that flag and get it back to us. And that people who have lost a flag, either ought to, pay some form of reparation or find that flag or not take another flag out on an expedition. There ought to be a hurdle to get over to take out additional flags. The third, let's see, is it number 3 or 4? It's number 4. The fourth and final thing I want to talk about here before we go to Q&A is an interesting discussions I've been having about member-suggested initiatives. You may not be surprised to know that as I became president and took over the presidential email box, that I had lots of people start texting me and communicating me with great ideas about things the club could do as part of our charitable outreach or work on climate or other ways to support members even. And by the way, we are a member organization. And so almost anything we do has been and will be suggested by other members. So suggesting things that our club could do or should do in your eyes is a good thing. Think of there are a few things that are codified in the bylaws, like that we'll have an ECAD and that we'll give out certain awards. But a lot of the others, like the fact that we have an Oceans Week, is because we had members who thought this would be a good idea, and they were excited enough to organize and get it going. And there were enough others that were also excited about it to continue it over years. And by the way, there's enough sponsors of it to make sure it's not a drain on the economics of the club. But interestingly, there are a lot of other ideas that there's basically an infinite number of other ideas, as far as I can tell, of things that could be and would be in many ways of measuring good things for the club to do with its time and resources. However, I'm sure you also understand we cannot do an infinite number of things especially if they don't have revenues associated with them that don't drag the club's ultimate time and money down to below zero. And so my challenge to people that are now bringing in initiatives, which again, bring initiatives, but bring initiatives that are fully wrappered. In other words, not only think about this is a good thing that we should get involved with, but who are all the people that are going to lead it? Who's going to, you can't just turn things over to our staff of 10. They have less than zero time left to handle new initiatives. So who are the people that are going to volunteer their time to do it? And not just for the one time, but how is this going to have, or maybe it is a one time if it's a one-time idea, but if you think this is something we do on an ongoing basis, it's got to have succession planning going back into it. And if you're going to be doing this, we again can't take on many, if any, new initiatives that not only don't cover their actual own costs, but also cover the costs of any staff that has to handle the emails or other things associated with it. So, ideas need to come. You can discuss them before this, but we can't take action on ideas until people have thought through truly the full cost accounting of what it costs us in money and time. How not only are its costs going to be covered, but a surplus of that to make it worth our time to grow into doing that, and leadership and succession planning for it to make sure that we ultimately aren't just either starting something that's going to quickly die or going to eventually end up in the laps of our staff again. And so anyway, member suggested initiatives, great idea, but they need to be fully baked before people at least expect us to push them up to the board or committee level for actual consideration of getting going. Let's dive in with a question from Peter Rowe. He basically wants to know what the status of the new publishing partnerships are, and I will pass it over to Will to dive in with that.
Sure. So we're full steam ahead in regards to our publishing deal that we signed with Random House Crown. As with anything else, and you may be hearing this again as we go through the questions, but due to the pandemic, things have been delayed. The author, there's 3 books that are scheduled. The author for the first book happens to reside in California, and he will be coming to the club in the latter part of May so that he can acquaint himself and start on his book, but he's been delayed in doing so because of transportation issues due to the pandemic.
Yeah, great. I'm actually very excited. And by the way, I know all of you can't be as close to the process to see what they're thinking in some of those details, but I think you're going to be very happy with these books. They're going to be another good thing that adds to the IP value of the organization and makes money, and which is important. And again, we don't have to make every decision based on money, but we have to make sure we don't make decisions that run us out of business. From Phil Erard. Erard, thank you. He is wanting to know about the timetable for the alterations of the clubhouse. This is the catch-all for the things above about asbestos and then other modifications, and when will we get the club open?
Sure. Okay. So I can address that. So Phil, first, I hope you're well. So very fortunately, we were blessed with the sponsorship of Discovery, which has approved $2 million worth of improvements to our building. And that currently is going full steam ahead. And it's funny because when I say it's going full steam ahead, everybody's like, well, really kind of nothing's going full steam ahead because of the pandemic. But things are happening in the background. We hired an architect who is working on a master plan so that we can look at the building as a whole and decide how we can better utilize some of the rooms, how we could better utilize the basement. I want to emphasize that one of the first things we're doing, which we hope to start within the next week to 2 weeks, is asbestos removal in the basement. All the asbestos in the basement is non-friable. It's perfectly safe. But we've decided to take a precautionary effort and remove it nonetheless because we hope to expand and use the basement more as we progress. So we're currently waiting for the City of New York to give us our permit. Normally that takes 10 days, but I guess again, because of COVID, it's been taking them a little over 20 days, and we're still waiting for their approval.
Thank you. And from Greg Diarmangian, and he is asking about chapter chairs would be greatly helped by having an updated list of all the members, fellows, and associates within their area. I have heard from Kevin and others that you can do that right now by emailing the department head. Emerald can send you an Excel of those people that are in your region. But the good, even better news is the glorious new website that I'm hoping Kevin gets a chance to showcase to all of you in one of the next Fireside Chats. We'll make that to where you can all do it on your own with a simple search. So very exciting that you can get it now, and it'll get much better. Anything to add there, Will?
No, I think that's absolutely right. It's just a matter of we can facilitate your request now, and it'll be more easy to do it once the new website comes about.
David Collette asked a fairly lengthy set of questions, or had some comments and question that went on that was very lengthy. Apologies for reducing it to such a small comment or thought. But his proposal was that one of the ways we can grow membership in a way that is important for bringing in this younger global group is to partner with universities and colleges to kind of create affiliate chapters to their existing 33 chapters that might be focused at colleges. And we talked about this one a bit before we're online. And it seems like the best thing. It's a very interesting idea, by the way. Hard to evaluate how easy, hard it would be, but that's the kind of idea you should take directly to Nancy Nino, our head of membership, or to Nancy McGee, our head of chapters, and they can discuss it with you. And if that works out, great. From Paul Neal, he's asking about ways that we can do a better job of connecting to our members. He had a number of ideas in a thread about that. And again, the thing I throw out there is the new website. I mean, we're gonna be doing a lot of things now online, and online has proven to be a great tool to bring us together. And having now seen the new website that is at least functionally hanging together, I am telling you that is going to be a significant aid to all of us spread out around the globe and soon to other planets, to where all of us can feel much closer than the miles between us. Okay, so then George Bash sends in some commentary and questions about our, being a good global citizen, and how as we go out on these expeditions, how are we going to lighten our footprints, whether that's in carbon or other conservation ways. And Will, I think you were going to talk a little bit about the club itself and some of the initiatives we might have for members.
Yeah, so part of the renovation of the building includes more ease of recycling, which we currently do now. We now, of course, we do not use single-use straws or single-use practice at the club. Even when someone rents the club and they decide to use paper plates or plastic forks, we require that they be recyclable, and we require that they be made of at least 60% recyclable material. In regards to the analysis what we're doing with the new air conditioning units, they will be far more efficient. We currently have a group coming in to do a cost analysis on the amount of electric we use, how we can minimize our footprint there. So there's a lot of things happening at the club that would be conducive to minimizing our carbon footprint.
And George, I happen to know also that we've worked together. When we did the Young Explorers of the North Pole expedition, the expedition bought carbon offsets for that. By the way, on my space flight, I also had bought carbon offsets for the gigantic, tank of kerosene that we burned for that particular trip. And one of the things I was actually really pleasantly surprised about in both those cases is frankly how affordable carbon offsets are. And so, I know that's something that you have the ability to provide for people, and there are other methods of doing that. And so, yes, I think that is something that people should consider by all means. Roberta Cravette asks, why have we not been allowed to form a New York chapter of the Explorers Club? Now, I know that this is a highly charged issue, that the people who want to form a New York chapter feel very passionate about that. And many of them are quite frustrated that they have jumped through what they believe are all these objective hurdles that I've just, like I was trying to say, we want to make sure that the as often as possible, decisions that we make should be by clear, objective criteria that you check the boxes and it should go through. The New York chapter has been one that has that discussion has suffered because it has not had that level of clarity. And so, first of all, know that I definitely understand the desire. I live here in New York. I could easily see that logic. Just to explain it again, the concern is really twofold. One is splitting the headquarters and New York events out of the main club is seen as a level of complexity that a lot of the local people would find a little tricky, but that wouldn't be enough on its own. The bigger one is that we already have a global problem where the New York residents are seen as having more importance or influence than others, and it is felt that this would exacerbate the problem. And so, by the way this works, the process is the committee makes a recommendation to the board. The committee that did this evaluation, which, by the way, that committee at the time held a plurality of New Yorkers, and that committee made the recommendation to the board that we do not create a separate New York chapter, and the board then accepted that recommendation. And by the way, this process of the board either approves or not approves the recommendation of a committee that's sent off to go study it is the way a lot of decisions are made on the board. And I think it's the right process for us to put around a decision. And so while I know that is not popular amongst the people who proposed it, and frankly, I think my personal opinion is not what's important in this case. The board votes are, and the committee's recommendations are, but that is the way that the cards have played out, is the committee says no and the board agreed to support that. Patricia Murphy asked something that is a bit of a repeat, but I don't think you answered it quite this directly. When do you think the clubhouse will be actually open for full use? Did you say that explicitly?
Yeah, I can say so. The asbestos removal is anticipated to take about 2 weeks once we get approval from the city. And then from there, we need 1 more week thereafter to, they're removing the asbestos. And then we're also clearing out some boiler tanks that have been there since 1910. They were coal-fired boiler tanks so that we can have room to have better utilization of the basement. So 3 weeks from the day that we get our permit to remove the asbestos.
Which is coming up soon. So
yeah, we hope it's coming up soon. People ask that question, and I mean, so much is dependent on so many variables that we have no control over. But somebody's at the club. If you're a member and you're in New York City, come to the club. We're there. I'm there. George is there. So if you need to utilize the building, you're certainly welcome to come and use it.
Aaron, can you help me with his last name there, Will? Angrinsum?
Yeah. Let me just look here.
Arngrinsum. I apologize. I'll have to learn how to better pronounce our global membership. He wanted to. He was asking about, is there a plan to further encourage fellow members to get their peers to apply for members at the Explorers Club? And the answer is yes, do it. But if you're saying, do you need some encouragement? Then here is the president of the Explorers Club encouraging all members on this call to share it with other members. To let's go do that. And I would say on that front, if you're looking to bring in new members, I would again go back to this. Think about the Explorers Club 50. Think about these new, incredible, young global explorers who are really the ones changing the world for the better. And they're the ones we need to drag into this club and then promote into leadership in this club. So let's do that, would be my advice. Wendy Kaplan asks, are there any plans in the work for outdoor mini events? And to that, I would say, Wendy, while the club is finally now slowly opening up, pending the asbestos removal and others, we are now planning an end of the year ECAD 2021. Hopefully, because that one will be so late in the year, we actually might push ECAD 2022 to a little bit warmer weather, and maybe even again do it outdoors, not because we necessarily have to from a COVID standpoint, but because we're putting so much planning and excitement into an outdoor ECAD, we think we actually might do one because we just think it'd be a good idea for fun. But if you mean additional plans, I would say no. I think we're now so close to being through this that at least I haven't heard anybody really proposing those. But if you want to do some, by all means, you'd be welcome to organize those within your own chapter or groups. Ronald Franco, he wants to know, he's pointing out that he lives in the path of the 2024 total eclipse. And wouldn't it be cool if, explorers could, there's probably other explorers that live on that path. How do we let each other know? How do we gather around that? And I would go back to that and say, look, this is going to be another perfect opportunity for the website. You're going to see when we get Kevin to present the new website to all of you that is actually one of the features that it has is this way to post and network to each other ideas like that and help coordinate groups of explorers from around the globe on a theme of that kind. So I think the new website will help a lot. Janine Selendy.
Yes.
She was asking, what is the club doing to encourage and recognize efforts to, help preserve the planet, biodiversity, address things like climate change, things of that nature. And what I would say on that is that our VP of Conservation, Mark Fowler, is right now putting together plans that I happen to have been privy to because I was talking to him and Martin Krause about it and others. They're putting together plans for a conservation council that will not only talk about how the club can do more on exactly this, but they're also even promoting that we adopt some awards that are specifically oriented towards conservation. Some of you might know that we used to have in our rules that conservation was not on the list for your ability to apply for a flag to take out an expedition. We've actually changed that. Conservation is now taking a much more central pillar. And I personally am a fan of let's start having an award specifically about conservation. If we wanted to make it a permanent award, that would require a bylaw change. And so we'll see how this goes. We'll see what they propose. But I wouldn't be too surprised if you all as membership ultimately see a bylaw change request come through your email box to where we make a permanent conservation award. But again, I'm kind of premature. They're still just noodling on it now. Kyle Foster asks about the mentor program. He was noting that he's very excited about it and wants to know how we can encourage more experienced members to join it. By the way, I agree with you insofar, and I've even asked to be a mentor by someone I'm very proud to take on as a mentee, but I myself don't know the answer to this question. I don't even know what the mentor program rules and procedures are. So Will, can you, now that I've agreed to do something I don't even know what I've agreed to, can you tell us what is the mentor program, what are its procedures, and how do we get more people in it?
So the mentor program is a program where seasoned individuals, explorers, will take on individuals and work with them to help mentor them, not only in their exploration experience, but also with the club as well. We're going to be expanding upon that further And that was an initiative that was fostered by our membership committee, Mark Brian Brown and Nancy Nino.
Bill Reedy actually asks, hi, Bill, good friend of ours. He asks, this is really just a personal question. He says, as explorers, some of us have experienced the overview effect. Having just returned from the Challenger Deep, is there a corresponding cognitive transformation you experienced? Please compare and contrast. So that's a fascinating question, Bill. And the short answer is no. The overview effect is such a powerful moment that when I returned, in fact, even before I got bound, as soon as I experienced the overview effect, that was so deeply meaningful and powerful. I mean, literally, as a hit you in the face kind of moment. That my first thought was, wow, if we could get 0.5% of humanity up into space, into orbit, to experience this, it would fundamentally change the course of the future of humanity. And I still believe that devoutly. Interestingly, going down that deep had first of all, if you are somebody who's been involved in high altitude planes or spacecraft, you'll find a lot of the issues very similar with going down deep in the sense of life support and pressure halls and food and water and that sort of thing. But really, one of my biggest impressions of going down that deep, and have been on other not as deep submersible trips, is just how profound it is that the pollution that we're dumping into the oceans are now everywhere. Whether I've been down to hydrothermal vents or the Titanic or now the Challenger Deep, it is remarkable that both general human trash, plastic and such, as well as now scientific trash, like the fiber optic cables that are used by ROVs to go explore some of these depths, are everywhere. And that was sort of disappointing, and it sort of really makes you think about how we're doing this as explorers, since we are the potential creators of some of that scientific trash, especially. We landed on top of and then traversed over this 7-mile fiber optic cord that appears to have been left behind by a 6-month previous to us visitor down in the Mariana Trench with an ROV. That's really a big deal. A couple more questions from Kyle Foster, who became a member right at the start of the pandemic. What sort of membership privileges would you encourage me to check out when the world opens up again? Wow. And let me read to question number 2 here. Are there efforts underway to improve digital access to flag reports? Both of these are fascinating questions. So first of all, Kyle, thank you. Congratulations for becoming a member. And yes, by the way, this is a true story about when I first became a member. I was in the 90s. I worked hard to find a way to write up my resume to make it to allow me to be shepherded in by my 2 recommenders and become a member. Once I arrived at the club, I immediately found the power of this organization. Many of you who know me well know that I really had a passion for exploring to the extremes, and in particular, getting myself into space. I had been trying to do that by investing behind astronauts and NASA engineers for probably a decade, all unsuccessful, because I would argue those guys are maybe great test pilots or great super scientists, but they aren't necessarily great entrepreneurs. And it wasn't until I went into the club and found a bunch of other like-minded orphans of Apollo, people who were inspired by the Apollo era and believed that the 2001 vision of our future was the future, and only to discover that we weren't, that wasn't happening. But we're inspired enough by that to help be part of this tech boom. And I would argue that a lot of our members who have now circled back, who went off and became part of this tech boom and built companies that were very successful in that era, have now circled back to say, look, we wanted that future. We believed in that future. We're going to now help manifest that future. And a lot of those organizations that came together to help manifest that future of exploring into the extremes, including all the way to space, formed at the Explorers Club. And so what you will find is if you start hanging out at the Explorers Club, whatever it is that you want to accomplish in exploration, I believe you will find those people in our membership. And whether you're the young explorer with the great idea of something needs to happen but you don't know how to do it, and you definitely don't have the resources to pull it off, you will meet people in this club that have been there and done that. They know who the outfitter is in that region. They know what gear you better pack along with you and what things to watch out for politically and animal and chemical dangers. And then you'll also meet the third type, which is the people that go like, hey, I'm the patron of exploration. I enjoy oceans, or I enjoy space, or I enjoy supporting these other things. And now that I hear your idea, which is great, and you're partnered with this gray-haired person who's been there, let's put this all together and go do some great exploring. And so that is how a lot of these frontiers and this great work, I believe, has come about, and it comes about right in our club. So whether you're in a chapter or whether you're at headquarters, I think going to chapter and club meetings is the first thing I would recommend to you. I think it's incredibly powerful. Thank you all so much for joining us here on the first of these Fireside Chats. Next time, I hope to have a fire with me. We actually planned to do this originally from a fireplace in front in the actual Explorers Club itself. Logistics made this much easier to pull off in this particular case. But the next board meeting is on a date in June. So within a couple of weeks of that, maybe late June, early July, I hope to be back with you again for another Fireside Chat. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you all for your questions and your support.